This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, folks, so we're in chapter 7, the skeletal system. So here you're seeing the first slide just showing you the functions of the skeletal system. Folks, do you really need to study this per se? You should pretty much know what this is already. Remember that now we're going into the continuing chapters and going into more of now the systems. So we looked at the integumentary system, right? Now we're looking at skeletal. Skeletal from here, we're going to look at the articulations, right? So we're going to be seeing all the joints of the body, and then we're going to be looking at the muscular system, okay? And then going into nervous system, okay? So the class is moving on, right? And so, but this is more interesting. This is more, I think this is, we've established a foundation, right, with these early chapters. Now we're going into what's going on as far as the skeletal system and all the structures and such. And know that with this PowerPoint, there's also quite a bit of information that's going to help you regarding your practical exam as far as remembering the different fossa, depression, foramen, right? So trochanter, right? So all of these different terms and such you're going to see, and I'm not going to review or go over all of those specific terms, but here we go as far as functions, right? So rigid support framework, contributing to movement by really the muscles are contracting and moving, pulling the bones. You'll see here protection of the organs, storing minerals, storing energy in the form of adipose tissue, right? So fat, the yellow marrow, primarily throughout the skeletal system. And remember that in the flat bones, as well as the ends of long bones, the epiphyseal regions, that's where you're going to have red marrow. Red marrow is going to do function of producing blood cells. Red marrow producing blood cells. So functions of the skeletal system. And this is just reinforcing it as far as just showing you what we just already talked about. And so, very good. Cartilage, right? So we understand the importance of cartilage. It's avascular, right? And it's important as far as protection of the ends of bones, right? As well as allowing for growth of bone, right? At what's called the epiphyseal plate, also known as the growth plate. So cartilage is very important. It's protective. We've talked about this already, so I'm not going to review this. You know elastic, hyaline, and fibro. You know where they're located. You know why they're important, okay? This is just as a review, but you should know this, and I'm not going to, like I said, review that because we've talked about that quite a bit. Here you're seeing as far as anatomy of long bone, okay? So I said to you that the ends of bone, ends of long bone, the epiphyseal, the epiphysis, the shaft of the bone, the diaphysis. Spongy and compact bone. You should know where they're located. Spongy and compact bone. Okay. You'll see here also that medullary cavity. Primarily, what's the medullary cavity going to contain? The yellow marrow. That's the adipose tissue. The red marrow, you're going to see that at, like I said, the ends of long bone. You're going to see it in flat bone, red marrow. Articular cartilage. Articular cartilage and the growth plate, also known as the epiphyseal plate, are hyaline cartilage. It's a remnant from the development of the fetus to have a development of the skeletal system, right? The hyaline cartilage is really a model upon which the skeletal system is built upon. Now we're going to see that there's another type of ossification also, all right? We'll see that in a couple minutes here. But again, hyaline cartilage protects the ends of long bone. That's that articulating cartilage. Doesn't this make sense, right? Why would you call it articular cartilage? What's a joint? A joint is an articulation, okay? So what would we say at the ends of long bone, protecting them from where? Articular cartilage. And again, you'll see here ligaments connecting bone to bone. Folks, you should know, you should be able to reproduce this image. You're gonna, probably a quiz Well, next week, no, next week we're having, sometimes what I've done over the years and such is had students just as a simple quiz, they had to draw this. Okay, that might be on the next quiz, not this coming up one, but the following one. Is that so this one right here, it's just an example of a joint. It's just an example. So it's really just an example of, it's not specific, correct? Because you're not seeing the patella and such. Yep. So bone classification. Now here's where I'm going to go pretty quickly through because honestly, these next slides and such, so you need to know these different classifications of bone. So long bone, short bone, flat bones, irregular bones, sesamoid bones. You need to know what they represent, what they look like, and what examples of them. Okay, so for an irregular shaped bone, so look at that pelvis, right? And we would say the pelvis. See how it's the three bones there, the ilium, right? The ilia, the pubic region, the iliac region, the pubic region, and the what? And the ischial region. So see this, we would say that that's a coxal bone, C-O-X-A-L, a coxal bone. So the pelvis is made up of two coxal bones, C-O-X-A-L, coxal bones. Not to be confused with, what's your tailbone called? The coccyx, right? Different, okay? But that's an irregular shaped bone. What would be another irregular shaped bone? How about the vertebra? Are the vertebra irregular shaped bones? Absolutely, yeah. How about the sphenoid bone? Right, you ever look at that, the wings and such? That's an irregular shaped bone, okay? So I'm gonna move through here and you're gonna see this next slide just gives you some more information, gives it to you in a table form. That's good, right? And here, over these next few slides, you're just seeing as far as examples of, and you should know for this test, for the skeletal system, you should know the types of, what would be an example of long bone. Now understand this. The bones of your metacarpals, the palm of your hand, your phalanges, they are considered long bones. Your metatarsals, long bone. Your toes, long bones, because they're longer than they are in width, okay? So they're considered long bones. You'll see here, as far as just what we talked about before there, the epiphysis, the diaphysis, okay? The epiphyseal plate is the growth plate. The medullary cavity, this is the area where yellow marrow is located, okay? And that yellow marrow can be converted to red marrow if needed. Remember that, okay? And then mentioning here as far as the articular cartilage, very good. Here we have that epiphyseal plate, also known as the growth plate. The epiphyseal line, once the growth has stopped as far as in height, once the growth has stopped as far as the length of bones and such, then it what? On X-ray, you'll see it'll be a growth, it'll be a line, it'll be a plate. That line there, the plate becomes a line. There's no more growth. So then is a person going to grow in height? No. Now, here's the thing. If they had a pituitary tumor and they stopped growing, right? So if they were still growing, yeah, they could become gigantic in proportion, right? And affect other body systems with that pituitary tumor. But know that if your patient stops growing in height, yet they still have growth hormone being kicked out, they're going to have what's called acromegaly. Have you ever heard of that? Acromegaly. So if you've ever seen Andre the Giant on TV, right? Andre the Giant stopped growing in height. He was a big dude, but he started his facial features really changed over the years. It wasn't just because he had gained weight. He actually had distinct changes for acromegaly, like his jaw, right? His mandible grew larger, frontal bone larger, nasal bone larger, okay? Hands, feet larger, acromegaly. Now, the covering of bone is the periosteum. There are two layers to the periosteum, an outer fibrous layer and an inner layer that is cellular. You should write that down. The periosteum has an outer fibrous layer, right? Tough connective tissue, protective. The periosteum has two layers, an outer fibrous layer made up of connective tissue, very important, very, very strong, durable, protective. The inner layer of the periosteum is cellular. And this is where you're going to have cells that are going to actually be able to produce bone and such. So let's look here. You'll see here, periosteum, dense irregular connective tissue lining the surface, right? That outer piece there. Contains blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels, tendons, and ligaments attached to the periosteum via perforating fibers. Does this not make sense that we're going to have, how would you anchor ligaments and tendons? You need to have that interweaving with the periosteum in order to create quite a bit of a bond. That would be very important. The endosteum. Now, endosteum is analogous to periosteum, but it lines the medullary cavity. Endosteum lines the medullary cavity. Remember, where's the medullary cavity? It's the inner layer of bone, right? It's that space where you're going to have the adipose tissue, yellow marrow. Okay? So the medullary cavity contains yellow marrow, medullary cavity, and it's lined with endosteum. Periosteum outer, endosteum inner. Both of them, you'll see here, contain cells that allow bone growth. Okay? So osteoblasts, does that make sense to you? An osteoblast is a synthesizing bone cell. Okay? So here we have the periosteum. You're seeing a histology slide of the periosteum. And again, it's those perforating fibers that anchor ligaments and tendons to the periosteum. Again, I really want you to know this image. So you need to know this image. You need to be able to, and so I want you to practice drawing this image. This is going to be helpful, again, when we're looking at the articular chapter for joints, okay, for articulations. I need you to know this. This is just a basic example of a synovial joint. This is an example of a synovial joint. It's a hollow, fluid-filled joint. A synovial joint. How do you spell synovial? What do you think? N-O-V-I-A-L. Synovial joint. It's a hollow, fluid-filled joint. Okay? That's the example of it. Showing you what's it all that a synovial joint encompasses, and in particular talking about the articulating cartilage. It's hyaline cartilage. Examples of, so we looked at examples of long bone and long bone anatomy. You'll see here there are short bones and flat bones. What do they look like? What's their significance? What are examples of them? You need to know that. Flat bone. Now, flat bone, think of it like a sandwich. Unfortunately, I think about a lot of things like food, but really it's a sandwich though, because what happens? You have here you see the periosteum, right, with the perforating fibers, see the examples right there. But then you're going to see that there is compact bone and then spongy bone sandwiched between compact bone. Okay. Is there a medullary cavity here? No, right? Nope, no. So flat bone, no medullary cavity. It's a sandwich of compact, spongy, compact bone. And you'll see here, spongy bone houses red bone marrow. And then we have here irregular and sesamoid bones. When you think of sesamoid bone, think patella. When you think of regular bones, think some of the skull bones. How about the scapula is more like a flat bone. But the vertebra, the coxal bones, irregular bones. Here's examples of the sesamoid bones, little tiny bones, oval-shaped bones. Now, the bone markings. So, what's an articulating surface? So you need to know, if you just see these terms, so by knowing these terms and by creating like a flashcard, like that, just like cards that you're just looking at a term and its definition, then this is going to help you as far as for your practical examination. Depressions, projections, holes and spaces. Here you have as far as examples of in this table here. Articulating surfaces, what's going on there as far as what are condyles, facets, a head, trochlea. You recognize all these terms because we've talked about the head of the humerus, the head of the radius, the head of the femur, right? The trochlea as far as for the humerus has at its distal end, the trochlea. Then the ulna, that U, that's the trochlear notch, right? And that's how we have this hinge type joint, right? So you know all these terms, you just have to, remember them. A fossa, a sulcus, projections, trochanter, tubercle, tuberosity and such, lines, process, ramus, epicondyles, associated with condyles, right? The holes and spaces. So canals, fissure, foramen, meatus, right? So we're looking at the external meatus as far as for that entrance to the canal for your sense of hearing. Sinuses. Right. So here we're going to be looking at more as far as microscopic is concerned, as far as structure of cartilage and bone. So again, we know hyaline, elastic, and fibro. We know what they look like. We're going to be tested on it next week as far as histology is concerned. We've already had the test, so we know where it's located. You need to remind yourself regarding those locations for each of those types of cartilage. Know that chondro is the root word for cartilage. So a chondrocyte is a cartilage cell. A chondroblast is a cartilage producing cell. So just like an osteoblast is a bone producing cell, right? Osteocyte, a bone cell, mature bone cell. Yep. So osteo is bone, chondro, cartilage. Now, and we also know this as far as the cartilage is concerned, these different types of cells present within the matrix, right? A matrix, they're in lacunae, spaces within the matrix. Spaces within the matrix, lacunae. Lacuna, singular, lacunae, plural. All right, we know it's avascular, there's a matrix, it's cells within a matrix. Types of bone, compact and spongy bone. Compact bone, we know what that looks like. It's comprised of osteons, right? That's the functional unit, structural unit of compact bone, the osteon. We'll look at that in a moment. Spongy bone, it is what it is what it says. It's like a sponge. There are holes in sponges, so there are holes present, right? Many holes present within spongy bone because it's made up of trabeculae. A trabeculae would be a rod of bone. So we can also call spongy bone trabecular bone. You know, we talked about a lattice, Lattice, a lattice work, right? That's like, you have these pieces coming together, but there's holes within. That's what I think of when I think of spongy bone. It's a sponge, it's a lattice. There are a lot of spaces present. And those spaces will house red bone marrow. So the cells, when we're looking at bone cells, osteo, right? Osteo. Chondro for cartilage, osteo, the root word for bone. So osteogenic cells, stem cells that replicate. They develop into osteoblasts and communicate via this term canaliculi. Canaliculi are these little canals in the bone that allow for processes from the bone cells to communicate with other bone cells. Canaliculi. Must have been an Italian who figured this out. Hey, canaliculi, yeah. Canicula. All right. So osteoblasts, again, they're producing bone, synthesizing new bone matrix. Osteocytes, just like chondrocytes, mature cells. So in the case of osteocyte, a mature bone cell. Located where? In lacunae. So cartilage and bone, cartilage cells, bone cells, located in lacunae, spaces within the matrix. Lacunae, spaces within the matrix. And really think about bone for a moment. So if we say that blood is fluid connective tissue, what is bone? Solid connective tissue, okay? Now, here's another one, osteoclasts. So an osteoclast is a type of cell that is involved in catabolic activity, breaks down. So it's actually breaking down bone. So understand the process of breaking down and building back up, breaking down, synthesizing new. This is taking place. So bone, it's very hard, but it's living tissue. So it's continually being broken down, and that's being replaced with new bone, okay? Important to remember that. So that's the case of the term bone remodeling. Bone remodeling. We're replacing old bone with new bone, okay? And how about this, folks? If you're in martial arts or something, right? You punch a board, a makiwara board, padded board and such, right? Keep on punching, punching, punching. What's it doing to the bone? So not only the bone on the fist, right? But how about the arm and such also? If we put stress on bone, no. Well, I mean, it can. You're right if you're not trained in it, right? But if you're doing it all the time, what's happening is that stress on bone increases the bone density. Stress on bone increases the bone density. Wolff's law, it's called. Stress on bone increases its bone density, meaning that what? It makes the bone stronger. Understand? There's a drill in martial arts where they'll take rice, uncooked rice. They put it in a container, right? And then they just put their hand into it over and over and over. What happens is that stress upon the bone helps to strengthen the hand. Such. Yeah, go ahead. I can't hear you. You have to say louder. Yeah, so when you work out, when you put stress upon the muscular system, you're also increasing your bone density. That's correct. You are correct, right? Yep. So not only are you strengthening the muscles, you're also strengthening the bone, increasing bone density. So here we look at, and actually at the end of this lecture today, I'm going to show you a video regarding the bone just to kind of reinforce what we're talking about right now. So and going over the structure of bone and such. So compact and spongy and such. So look at here as far as the osteon, structural unit of compact bone. And what you're seeing, and I want you to know this, folks, right? So imagine my roll of paper towel is an osteon. Okay, so think about, and it'd be helpful to think about it this way. So imagine that I have multiple osteons present. Here's another one. Now look at this, right? So you have like one here, right? That hole is the central canal of the osteon. okay? The rings, so you see where it says here, concentric lamellae? So they are composed of concentric lamellae, these layers of bone. Does that make sense to you? Right? Layers of bone. So an osteon made of rings of matrix called concentric lamellae, right? Now, again, the central canal, that's where we have, see how there's blood vessels in that central canal, right? See how there's also, in like the horizontal plane, there are also canals, right? Those are called perforating canals. And they connect the vessels of the central canal to adjacent osteons. That's the perforating canal. So look right here, folks. See this? See that perforating canal right there and right here? See how it's connecting the central canals of each of the osteons? And know that, you'll see this in the video, that because of bone remodeling, some osteons are going to look perfect because they're new. But some are going to look like there's only like a piece of an osteon there. Why? Because of bone remodeling. We're replacing old bone with what? New bone. Understood? And really, now look at the shaft of this bone here. Folks, do you see the shaft of this compact bone right here? Here's the medullary cavity. Here's the compact bone. So know that these osteons are really like cylinders of bone, of concentric lamellae. That's why I show you the paper towel. So understand that we have multiple paper towel rolls here. It would be representative of multiple osteons in the compact bone. And they go the shaft of the bone, okay? Now, nutrients and waste move through the what? Hey, the canaliculi, you know, right? So that's kind of thinking, I mean, you know what, sometimes like something being a little silly, just kind of like, it sticks with you though. So canaliculi, all right? Now, look over here, and you recall, you've seen this, folks. You've seen this in the lab. You've seen the histology of compact bone, and it looks like tree trunks were cut, trees were cut, and you're just seeing like the cross section of the tree trunk, right? And you're seeing that some of the osteons are bigger and some are smaller because of what? What's the word? R begins with an R. Remodeling, replacing old bone with new bone. Okay. Spongy bone, osteocytes within trabeculae. These are rods of bone. Did I say that before? If I didn't, rods of bone. So that's these rods of bone, right? There's spaces between them. Between the spaces in the holes, that's where the vessels will pass through, will move throughout. So one thing you need to come away with is thinking that bone is very vascular. Bone is very what? Vascular. Good. And again, stress upon bone, you see here, these trabeculae, beams of bone that form lattice-like network within the spongy bone. And they form along stress lines to provide strength. Okay, so very important. You're seeing there the femoral head, neck, and a portion of the greater trochanter. Right. Now, hey folks, I pass through it when I'm doing the lecture and such, but there's a lot of extra information on these PowerPoints that you should be reading and looking at and going over and trying to answer the questions. Can be very helpful to you. Please do that. And it gives you the answers also. So ossification. So listen to this statement. Cartilage ossifies to become bone. That's true, correct? Cartilage ossifies to become bone. Right? That makes sense. Because we start with a cartilage model, right? So endochondral ossification, we start off with hyaline cartilage, and then we synthesize bone. Intramembranous, right? So think membrane. So we start with a connective tissue membrane to produce the synthesized bone. But again, ossification, cartilage becomes bone. Or in the case of intramembranous, that's endochondral. In the case of intramembranous, you'll see the term membrane is right in the name. So connective tissue membrane becomes bone. Endochondral, where do you see chondral? Chondro, cartilage. So endochondral ossification, hyaline cartilage becomes bone. Here we have an example of intramembranous. So think the flat bones, intramembranous ossification. Intramembranous ossification, the flat bones. Remember, it's a sandwich, compact bone, spongy bone, compact bone, right? Endochondral. There we go. As far as we're taking a hyaline cartilage model and we're ossifying to become bone. And what's a very important part of this? Vascularity, blood vessels, right? Again, bone is highly vascular. So if you fracture a bone, will it bleed? Yes. This next slide here, combination of intramembranous and endochondral ossification, the formation of ossifying of the embryonic and fetal skeletons. So again, folks, just a reminder, you need to read the breakout sections. You need to read the think, pair, and share activities. And they give you the answers, folks, in it. So review. Growth, repair, remodeling. Again, replacing old bone with new bone, remodeling. So cartilage growth, interstitial, and appositional. Interstitial cartilage growth. Cartilage grows longer. Excuse me. Appositional, cartilage grows wider. Simple enough. So you're going to have and allow for bone to increase in length, interstitial cartilage growth. Appositional cartilage growth allows bone to increase in width. And here you're just seeing examples of. You can review this on your own. Right, so that epiphyseal plate, that remnant of that hyaline cartilage model, right? The epiphyseal plate, the growth plate. How about the articular cartilage? The remnants of the hyaline cartilage model, right? So both are hyaline cartilage. And the area of ossification, so look on that slide number 3, it's kind of hard seeing here, but you can see it on your PowerPoints. And you'll see that that's where closer to, look at here. So you see here this is the diaphysis. Area of new ossification is right here. Epiphyseal plate growth. And here you're seeing the anatomy of the epiphyseal plate. And here you're seeing as far as that was growth in length, here's growth in width, diameter. So again, bone remodeling, the changes bone go through on a daily basis. So now think about this for a moment. What would be a condition that would cause a decrease in bone density? So I told you about what can happen with an increase in bone density, right? Stress to bone increases bone density, bone strength. What about though, what would happen, what process would occur that would actually cause a decrease in bone density? Well, how about osteoporosis? Osteopenia, osteoporosis. Osteopenia, we're beginning the stages, and then osteoporosis, we're definitely demineralizing the bone. Correct. Now you'll see here at the bottom, at the bottom of the slide here, bone remodels to increase strength along lines of resistance. Here we have, as far as I need you to know these two. So, you know, we're going to be doing the endocrine system AMP2 next semester, but you need to know that some different hormones that we're going to be talking about, and two in particular are, and really what they are, they're antagonistic. One, they do opposite effects. So if one raises, one lowers, right? So look at this for a moment here. So calcitonin causes bone to take up calcium, so it lowers. So here's the thing, calcitonin lowers blood calcium levels. Important to know as far as for the thyroid gland, calcitonin. As far as the parathyroid glands producing PTH, parathyroid hormone, this will increase blood calcium levels. And just to give you a little hint here, right? So how am I going to increase blood calcium levels? Well, parathyroid hormone helps in the process of osteoclastic activity, breaks down bone, which releases calcium into the blood. Okay, so parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone and calcitonin, they do opposite effects, but know that parathyroid hormone has more of an effect on calcium levels than does calcitonin. So parathyroid hormone has more of an effect on blood calcium levels than calcitonin. And here they're giving you some more hormones and such. I just want you to know, of note, right? Of note, that growth hormone will contribute to synthesis of the body growing and such, right? And also thyroid hormone helps to maintain proper symmetry in growth of the human body, right? Instead of having one limb longer than the other, right? No, there's symmetry, okay? Thyroid hormone is involved in that. Now here we have, as far as bone repair is concerned, okay? And we're going to stop, let's see, we're going to stop. Yeah, we're going to stop after fractures. So what's going on as far as the healing of a fracture? So you'll have, and I highlighted here for you just to help you to like memorize this and quickly know. So a hematoma. So this is you'll see here that it's like a collection of blood. Prevents blood loss. Cartilage callus forms a new bone template. The callus is replaced by what? By bone. So cartilage ossifies to become what? Bone. And then compact bone is built around the outer surface of the bone. And so honestly, the area where there was the fracture will become stronger than it was before than the surrounding areas, okay? Because of that whole process of bone repair. Now, a reduction and stabilization can occur in order to help with the healing process of fractures. So stabilizing, you can have, look, it says there, cylinders, screws can be added surgically. A reduction means a realignment that's going to take place. Now, these next couple of slides, you'll have to memorize these, knowing the differences between these different types of fractures. I'll give you something of an example. So this is a green stick fracture. Green stick fracture, that's number G on here, right? So what can occur is that, folks, in young bone, so it's a little bit more pliable and such, right? And know that, and even in adults and such, right? Bone has a little bit of give to it, okay? It doesn't just snap right away, right? It has some give to it. You'll see people lift crazy amounts of weights, right? The bone has that a little bit of flexibility to it, and those collagen fibers are very important. Now, a green stick fracture. So if I have a stick that I cut, I used a chainsaw off a live tree, I cut a branch off. If I tried to break that branch that was only just a few minutes ago alive, and I tried to like snap it, it's going to bend before it actually, breaks and such. And that's why they call it a green stick fracture. Okay, so it can take the bend a little bit, and then it's going to have a fracture there, but not fully through and such. So you'll see here that the examples. So I'll start from the left, reading left to right. So a closed fracture, it's all within the body. An open fracture, right? You'll see here, the bone is actually sticking out of the body, okay? We'd say simple and compound fractures and such. Also another terms that were used. Transverse fracture, you'll see a spiral fracture. Can we see spiral fractures in child abuse cases where a child is like, their arm is grabbed, and it's terrible stuff, terrible stuff. But that, we can see that, spiral fractures. Comminuted, you'll see here, as far as there's some really like destruction of bone. Impacted fracture, so can we have, like, as a result of someone falls from a height and they land on their feet and that force goes into their lower extremities and such? How about their spine, right? That compound compression fracture, yeah. Green stick, and then oblique fracture is more of an angle. And here you're seeing, as far as, so they gave you the images and then just giving you the terms and their definitions of the different types of fractures. All right, we're going to stop here for tonight.